I'm Christian Bryant, and this just doesn't feel right. Like, it doesn't feel right for me. Like, it feels kind of stuffy. You want to just, like, let's not do the newsman at the desk thing right now and just go outside? You know what? Yeah, let's go outside. Here, let's do it. We're doing it. We're going outside. Come on. Go. Sometimes you just gotta shake it up. There's plenty of time for ITL from the desk, but instead let's try ITL from the streets. And man, do these streets look different than they did a couple of years ago with the outdoor dining and the outdoor drinking and the general outdoor takeover for restaurants, bars, and pedestrian. You can add one more item to the list of things that the pandemic has totally reshaped: our cities. One recent study showed that out of all the urban mobility actions across more than 500 cities and regions around the world, a quarter of those moves reallocated curb space, and a fifth of them fully closed streets. So what used to be street parking is now an outdoor dining patio for a tapas restaurant. That 2-lane thoroughfare is now a cramped single-lane road shared with a wooden streetery. And that little side street is closed to traffic altogether. That's taken away a lot of space for cars and drivers, but it's given local businesses, including restaurants like Hades here in DC, a bit of a lifeline to make it through some seriously challenging times. Who are these people in the pictures around the restaurant?
Most, 80% of those people is myself.
Oh.
You see?
It's mostly just you.
The most is me. You wanna know how I get there? I get first year like 80 or 90% of the sales we lost.
How exactly did the streetery impact your business?
Like this, and the sale went up like 40% last year.
DC started its Streatery program, that's a combo of street and eatery, in the summer of 2020. In a survey by the District Department of Transportation, nearly 90% of businesses supported keeping streeteries in place, even post-pandemic. And about 80% of the public said that they liked the outdoor dining and retail program. Granted, DC is already a pretty pedestrian-friendly city, but the expansion of outdoor spaces like these is very much a trend nationwide.
People enjoy, they really like it and like to be, see the sunlight or the stars or whatever, whoever passing by the street. And I think maybe this is the future.
But if restaurants and bars are the winners in America's pandemic-era outdoor expansion, cars and drivers are undeniably the losers, or at least they're losing space. And don't blame the pandemic entirely. City planners like Andrew Trueblood tell us it was only a matter of time.
We really built on work that had already started around using the public realm for people. We sort of inherited many streets that were built first for moving cars as quickly as possible. And in some cases you need to do that, but in many places like neighborhoods, it's really about moving people and having people experience a place. And so what's nice is we had the building blocks there that we were able to really kind of quickly re-engineer across the city and deploy very quickly.
Many cities are deciding on what happens next. Basically, whether cars will get their spots back post-pandemic. In DC, the city has extended its Streatery program through next February and is planning on something more permanent in the future.
In the short term, we've seen them stick around. I think I've seen in the world of government, it's hard to take something away. Some may go away, but I think you'll see these for a longer period of time.
I told you we'd come back to the desk at some point. You know, this whole pandemic is a global situation. That's pretty much what pandemic is, an illness that spreads across multiple countries or continents. And life has changed for people all over the world, sometimes in very different ways. To give us a look at city streets around the world, we decided we'd phone some friends who just so happened to be reporters. Let's start with Triny Mena in Caracas, Venezuela.
Here in Venezuela, as in many Latin American countries, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a deep economic impact, and you can see it as you walk through the city. Lockdown orders since March 2020 forced 30% of the commercial sector out of business. Traditional name brands have disappeared from the market, and many people have moved to an informal, unregulated kind of work. The streets are filled with people selling water, batteries, anything that other people would want to buy. Also, we are seeing lots of delivery services and food trucks, and that is new for the country that is also using dollars. A de facto dollarization is taking place in the country. And at buildings like the Central University of Venezuela, repair work are on the way as the country prepares to open schools and universities.
All right, much appreciated, Mari. Let's move over to Central Europe. How are things looking there?
Well, I'm Trent Murray in Berlin. I am walking along what would normally be one of central Berlin's busiest streets. And the reason I can do that is because here is now part of a pilot project being run by the city. It's called Autofrei, which literally translates to car free. Now, this pilot project was set up in the summer of last year. It was only meant to last for 6 months, but it's been extended. And the reason for that, authorities say, is because it's not only been popular, but it's been very good during the COVID pandemic, maintaining social distancing for people, outdoor dining, outdoor shopping, and the exclusive use of this street by pedestrians and cyclists. Now, the jury is still out on whether this will become a permanent fixture in Berlin, but certainly authorities I've spoken to say the COVID-19 pandemic has made them rethink the way they want to use public space here in the German capital. Trent Murray for Newsy, Berlin.
Much appreciated, Trent. And moving east now to one of the most strictly controlled cities in the world when it comes to this virus.
I'm Patrick Falk in China's capital, Beijing. As the political heart of China, it's had some of the toughest COVID-19 restrictions seen anywhere in the country. Anytime you walk into a building, residential compound, or even public park, there are checkpoints where you need to show your QR health code, have your temperature checked, and sometimes even register your name, number, and address. To make sure people filter through these checkpoints, a lot of roads and walkways have been sealed off. So for a lot of people, there's no more access to those regular routes and shortcuts they take to get about the city. That can be frustrating, but for a lot of people, they see it as necessary for keeping the virus at bay. To date, there have been a little over 1,000 cases of COVID-19 recorded here and just 9 deaths in total. Pretty remarkable for a city of more than 20 million people. Another thing that's changed is that you notice there are far fewer non-Chinese here than before. A lot have left, a lot of foreigners have left or been locked out of the country because of travel restrictions. And with as many attractions, Beijing is a popular tourist destination, but foreign visitors can't come here for now.
And thanks for that, Patrick. One more stop to make on this trip around the globe. Let's hear from our correspondent in Uganda.
I am Leon Ssenyange in Uganda's capital, Kampala, which is a bit bigger in terms of size than Washington, D.C. In East Africa, it's actually the 3rd smallest capital city with a population of about 3.5 million people living and working here. It's normally a very vibrant, crowded city, and in some places, it's so congested you can get stuck in downtown traffic for hours. But like many other places, life has been seriously disrupted here over the past 18 months because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is still very much a living, daily reality because of the slow pace of vaccination, so navigating life generally has been very challenging. Uganda has imposed some of the toughest lockdowns in Africa. The lockdowns forced many people out of the capital, businesses shut altogether, and shopping arcades emptied out. With the slight easing of restrictions late last year, life started coming back to a new version of normal. So there are definitely more people on the streets and a bit more traffic on the roads. But one major change to city life has been the nighttime curfew, which means the city empties out by 9 p.m. The government says it won't open up the city until at least 5 million people are vaccinated, but half that number has been vaccinated so far.
Much appreciated, Leon, and thank you to the rest of the correspondents worldwide for that bit of global perspective. It gives you a sense of the scale of these conversations around business closures, vaccines, masks. That's happening everywhere. All right, coming up, we've got a lot more for you in tonight's In the Loop, including a conversation around police on TV and how the drama can blur the lines between truth and fiction. plus a sneak peek of Newsy's new documentary series, In Real Life. But first, we're bringing back something we love on ITL and something y'all could probably use. We've been slacking on keeping y'all, We've been slacking on keeping y'all in the loop on trending, but all that changes after the break. When it comes to ITL, you've got your main course with the kind of stuff we just did, but truly, it's not a meal until you throw in a few side dishes, you feel me? That's where the trending topics come in, so let's get to it. Here's what's trending on social. Bacon prices just recently broke $7 a pound, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, reaching a 40-year high. The last time bacon was this expensive, people were just learning the term VHS and the mayor of Amity Island was mismanaging a crisis involving a shark. The price jumped about 28% in the last 12 months, so thanks pandemic. Supply chain issues, rising prices of feed, transportation, and labor, and the reemergence of African swine flu have all played a role, something that could affect American pork producers but hasn't. Don't worry, your bacon ain't sick, it's just expensive. Luckily, prices have likely peaked and should go back to normal by next summer. We'll go ahead and call it Hot Pork Summer. 3 of the most well-known West Coast rappers will be putting on at SoFi Stadium in LA for the next Super Bowl. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Kendrick Lamar were all announced as halftime show performers. R&B royalty Mary J. Blige and spaghetti connoisseur Eminem will also be making an appearance. And naturally, folks had some thoughts, especially about that last performer, saying he's already ruined the performance and Super Bowl producers should get rid of him. Honestly, y'all capping if y'all say you're not excited to see how another random Super Bowl halftime lineup puts on a show. Plus, you don't want smoke with Eminem stans. Jay-Z's Rock Nation will produce the show, which will be their 3rd. Halloween may still be weeks away, but the internet has basically made the whole month of October a time to celebrate all things scary. If you ain't with it, spooky season has a name, Spooktober. For the last several years, Halloween has become the country's 2nd top grossing holiday behind Christmas, which is hard to beat. And now that it's gotten drawn out for a whole month, people are shelling out a pretty penny. According to the National Retail Federation, this year in total, Americans are expected to spend $3.3 billion on costumes, $3.2 billion on decorations, and $3 billion on candy. It's a historic high coming after a year of low-key activities during the pandemic, so prepare for some extra spooktacular events. Besides, what's scarier than the last year and a half? Am I right? What's something that we, myself included, and the US have in common? Debt. We'll tell you more when you're back. We now turn to Congress, where the good news is lawmakers came together to avert a government shutdown. The bad news, an even bigger problem is on the horizon. The US needs to raise its debt ceiling to ensure it can pay its bills. If not, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns the government could default on its loans October 18th. That would likely cause a global financial crisis. Newsy's Stephanie Liebergen explains what the debt ceiling is, how it works, and what the outcomes of this vote could look like.
The national debt limit is again up for debate on Capitol Hill. So what exactly is it?
Congress puts a limit on how much can be borrowed in total from the US government, how much total debt they can have. And the debt ceiling is that limit. It's an amount of borrowing we cannot breach.
The debt limit, or debt ceiling, is a fixed number, which means from time to time, Congress needs to vote to raise or suspend it. If that doesn't happen, the U.S. would default on its debt or other financial obligations, and that could have significant impacts not only in the U.S., but around the world. It's unclear exactly how bad it would be because it's never really happened before, but experts warn it could cause a global financial crisis.
Congress has to raise the debt limit. This should not be a negotiable. You don't play chicken with the full faith and credit of the U.S. government.
After being suspended for 2 years, the debt limit is currently $28.5 trillion. We've already hit that number. So Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has been taking, quote, extraordinary measures to ensure the country doesn't default on its debt. Once October 18th hits, the Treasury will be out of options and unable to pay its bills. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has come out against voting yes to raise the debt ceiling, citing Democrats' spending plans. But hitting the debt limit does not stop Congress from spending more money.
The borrowing is put into effect when we cut those taxes, or when we increase that spending program, or when we refuse to finance, our current growing entitlement programs.
So the debt limit is not, should we spend more money? The debt limit is, should we pay for the, spending we already did?
That's exactly right. The debt limit is, should we pay for the spending we already agreed to?
Senator Tim Kaine, who has proposed reforming the debt ceiling, said defaulting on the nation's debt is simply not an option.
And we're not going to default on the nation's debt for the first time in 240 years. And my confidence in that comes from my conversations with my Democratic colleagues. Things that are negotiating tools or acceptable on the other side of the aisle, they're not acceptable to us, and they're not negotiating tools for us.
Stephanie Liebergen, Newsy, Washington.
So now that you've gotten a primer on the debt ceiling, we wanted to bring somebody in to help us get even more clarity on what's going on right now. Newsy's political director and ITL sixth man. He's held it down for me in my absence. Newsy's Andrew Rafferty. Andrew, first and foremost, thanks for being on the show. I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Why should Americans care about this at all?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so many of these debates we hear playing out in Washington are in many ways nebulous. It takes a while, if there even is any impact that most Americans feel by the debates going on in Congress. But this one is very different. And one of the reasons why is because of the immediate impact. That's really the stock market most certainly will go down, maybe even tank, if the U.S. defaults. That means your retirement savings, any sort of stocks you have. And then Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen laid out a number of other impacts. It's going to mean delays or possible cancellations of Social Security checks. Those who are waiting on what we know as the child tax credit, there's going to be delays there. It's going to be bad, and it's going to be felt by nearly everyone, CB.
I have my own sort of debt limit, right? It's my credit limit. And I feel like I know how I've gotten to where I am personally, but how did we get here? I mean, there have been so many things to focus on in the news cycle. And for a lot of people, it's kind of like, okay, wow, like we're in this position. How exactly did we get here?
Yeah, well, kind of the undercurrent of all this, Christian, is that it is political, as everything that happens in Washington is. But I think both sides know that there's kind of a way out, but there's some brinksmanship going on. Republicans don't want to raise this debt ceiling. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has been very clear about that, even though this is spending that has been spent by both Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Republicans, Democrats alike. And so he says that Democrats should go it alone. And they could theoretically go it alone through this other process called reconciliation, which we've covered on this show, but is a kind of this very wonky Congress way of passing things by just one party. So Democrats can theoretically do that, and that might be what happens. But Chuck Schumer, who's the leader of Democrats in the Senate, says that's a very dangerous thing to do when the stakes are so high for all the reasons that we just talked about, Christian.
I guess one more thing to help me get a fifth grader's understanding of all of this. You know, you don't see this happening in other countries, so I'm curious to know, does it have to be this way?
That's literally the question, and the answer really is no. It doesn't need to be this way. There hasn't always been a debt limit. It came around in 1917. This isn't something that has started with the foundation of the country. So you're hearing a lot of possible solutions mentioned right now. One is a $1 trillion coin that can be printed and given to the Federal Reserve to kind of give more of a buffer, more money essentially to the Treasury. But one of the more serious ones that is being floated by likes of Tim Kaine is essentially giving more power to the actual president during this and allowing them to raise the debt ceiling and then allowing Congress to vote on that, as opposed to the way it works now, which Congress, as we see, has to have some big debate and agree on something, and then it can get over to the president. But giving the executive more power might be one way to kind of bypass this or make it less of a crisis.
Newsy's Andrew Rafferty, political director. Thank you so much for shedding some light on this for us, and we hope to have you again soon.
Hopefully not to talk about this, though. Hopefully we get past this.
We'll find something else. Don't worry. There's plenty. We'll pick something else and we'll go from there. When you're back, we're talking about copaganda. We're diving into cop shows and their influence on public opinions about police. In June of 2020, during nationwide protests against police violence, the long-running and highly controversial TV show Cops was canceled. But by October of that year, the show had quietly resumed production. The show was picked up by Fox's streaming service and returns today. Some of the controversy around Cops is part of a wider discussion about law enforcement's relationship with Hollywood and how the police are portrayed on TV, from ride-along reality series like Live PD to scripted series like Law and Order or Blue Bloods. Now, I know what you're thinking. Christian, it's TV, it's entertainment. Can we just watch these shows we like? And for the record, yes, absolutely. I mean, I watched The Witcher and I don't find Henry Cavill's rune magic or his luscious looks to be especially realistic. The difference with police dramas, in both reality TV and fiction, is that they're unrealistic portrayals of much higher stakes. Many Americans are faced with their real-world issues, like police brutality and misconduct, every day, but you'll rarely see those issues play out accurately on these shows. That matters because the genre has tremendous exposure among the American public. Scripted police procedurals are some of the most popular and longest-running shows on television. For the 2019-2020 season, about a fifth of all network shows were about law enforcement. They account for the two longest-running dramas currently on air, Law and Order SVU and NCIS, and make up 7 of the 15 most-watched scripted series last year. This genre has massive viewership, so it's really no wonder it can have a huge cultural impact too. One study found that viewers of crime dramas are slightly more likely than non-viewers to think police are very successful at lowering crime, use force only when necessary, and that misconduct doesn't typically lead to false confessions. Beliefs which, I should note, were already pretty popular at the time of this study, regardless of watching these shows. Now, that doesn't necessarily prove these shows make people think this way. It's possible they could be drawing viewers who already believe those things. But regardless, it does give some insight into what misconceptions these shows may bring you, the hyper-competency of the police, and that force is always justified. Let's compare that to reality. For one example, on the longest-running primetime drama currently on air, Law and Order SVU, our heroes solve all of their sexual assault cases, and usually in just a few days.
So he'll go to jail for a very long time.
The reality is much more bleak. The national clearance rate for rape cases is shockingly low. About 33% of cases were closed in the FBI's most recent data. That's the second lowest violent crime solve rate behind robbery, where only about 30% of the cases were closed. And how about those moments on these shows when the cops are stuck, like some annoying bureaucracy is getting in the way, so they've got to cross a couple of lines to get justice? That's only when justified, right?
You're right, there's no cameras down there. So, it's your word against mine. You grab for my sidearm.
You can't do this.
And yet...
Yeah, as you might have guessed, police misconduct isn't nearly as successful at getting justice as you'll see on these shows. Just over half of all false criminal convictions are because of official misconduct. That includes misconduct in interrogations.
Look at it.
Fabricating and planting evidence.
Tomorrow morning, an anonymous tipster will report that they saw Bunch pushing Jenna Lombard into his vehicle. Her hair will be found on his back seat, and he will go to prison.
And most common of all, purposefully hiding evidence that could clear the defendant. Whether from law enforcement or prosecutors, that was seen in 44% of all exonerations.
Is there anything I need to know or not know?
We're good.
It might make for dramatic TV, but these misconceptions we might get about policing can be pretty dangerous when we're applying them to the real world, especially when we're litigating actual police incompetence or misconduct, which is much more rampant than these shows want to acknowledge. Despite how popular these shows are now, recent polling tells us a majority of people think cop shows should change to more accurately reflect policing in the United States at the very least. And in the wake of recent protests against police killings, a number of these shows are rethinking how they portray the police. For example, ABC's The Rookie has been partnering with the civil rights nonprofit Color of Change to consult and even rethink some of their storylines.
Tell him that it's immigrants like them that make Americans like you look bad. If it was up to me, we'd send them all back by catapult.
Dijo que debes evitar tocar la bocina a un policía cuando tu camioneta está en violación de la mayoría de los códigos de vehículos del estado.
In the pilot of the show, a training officer aggressively reprimands 3 Mexican gardeners in order to train their rookie to be tougher.
Do I seem laid back to you? Wishy-washy in any way?
No, sir.
Entonces, ¿por qué cambiarías las palabras que salen de mi boca? Everything is a test, Officer Chen, and you just got another F.
Later in the 3rd season, that rookie challenges the officer to imagine how the gardeners actually felt about the terrorizing encounter, which for them was not just a test. That officer reflects and admits he was wrong.
You're right. Yeah, I used the situation with the gardeners without thinking about the impact I had on them.
This is just one example of the ways shows can rethink how these moments are more thoughtfully explored, even in a way that still serves the story. And The Rookie isn't alone. CBS, the network behind many top-rated shows like the massive NCIS franchise, made a deal with a police reform group, 21CP Solutions, to advise portrayals of police on its shows. The signs of improvement are there, but there is still much room for progress. For example, a number of other shows can sometimes acknowledge these problems in passing, but they might be framed as an optics problem for the police.
I haven't seen this long a queue of listeners calling in since I don't know when. I hope you're ready, Commissioner.
Well, Jim, you give the people what they want and they come out for it. So bring on the pitchforks and torches.
Or just a matter of a few bad apples.
Cops did this. And if any police officer who might have had reason to cause your father harm did it, that's a killer, not a cop.
Cop shows are not going away. There's a reason so many people love these shows. There's something really appealing about a world with clear-cut villains and heroes, a world where cops are always working for the greater good, even when they step outside the lines, and the institutions they work for are beyond the need for reform. But it's clear there's a more accurate way to tell stories about the police, because when police misconduct harms, jails, or even kills innocent Americans, let's remember how reality can be so very different from fiction. You know, one interesting thing we noticed when putting this piece together is that even though most of the protagonists in these shows are white, so many of their bosses, the police chiefs, the superintendents, the bureaucratic higher-ups, almost all of them were people of color, or women, or both. Seriously, almost all of them. It got us thinking, is that just a coincidence? Over the past couple of years, TV shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and SWAT have started centering their stories on diversity within law enforcement, highlighting the experiences of cops of color and those in the LGBTQ community. It's a win for on-screen diversity, but are there greater implications here for how these shows want us to think about the real-world police? Newsy's Casey Mendoza explores why diversity seen in law enforcement on TV could actually be a distraction from the larger issues.
Catch bad guys and look good doing it.
I also get to help people.
Want to save my life? Let me save yours.
Crime shows, cop dramas, and even sitcoms about detectives can be pretty aspirational when it comes to law enforcement. In serious shows like NCIS Los Angeles, characters like those played by LL Cool J and Chris O'Donnell represent devoted public servants. And when cops are funny, like Andy Samberg's Detective Peralta in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, they're endearing.
You in prison. Me meeting Regis Philbin.
But amid the growing criticisms in real life about police brutality and racial injustice, some critics want audiences to think more critically about what they're watching.
You could say that it's a fantasy of what a police department is, but it's actually depicting itself as the real thing, and it gives cover for the violence that the real thing is doing.
Writer and journalism professor Stephen Thrasher has covered police violence, racial injustice, and the Black Lives Matter movement since 2014.
And I myself have been pepper sprayed and threatened by police many times, so I don't find police particularly funny.
Thrasher is referring specifically to Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a fan-favorite comedy about the hijinks and relationships of a fictional New York City precinct. After 8 seasons, it aired its series finale last month.
Jake, are you crying?
No.
Yes.
Created by the same writers behind upbeat comedies like Parks and Rec and The Good Place, Brooklyn Nine-Nine was praised for its diverse cast and its handling of topics like racism, homophobia, and sexism within policing. In 2018, the show even won the award for Best Comedy Series from GLAAD, an organization that recognizes achievements in LGBTQ media.
You know what the toughest part about being a gay black police officer is? The discrimination.
So why are critics of cop shows apprehensive?
Because it's a comedy, it actually creates for a particular kind of what we call copaganda, a form of cop propaganda in media. When it's funny, it really makes characters lovable, it makes them likable.
And when it comes to diversity and inclusion within the show, Thrasher worries it can skew viewers' perceptions of whether real-life progress is being made.
Diversity can be a catch-all word that doesn't necessarily mean better conditions for quote-unquote diverse people or equity for quote-unquote diverse people. And in fiction and nonfiction, I think seeing people of color as soldiers, as police officers, is supposed to give the idea that things are better for people of color.
Beyond Brooklyn Nine-Nine, other TV shows like SWAT or movies like Monsters and Men have centered their narratives around Black law enforcement professionals. In real life, over 15% of law enforcement professionals are Black, which is slightly higher than the percentage of the Black U.S. population as a whole, but less than most major American cities. More diversity in the profession doesn't necessarily mean less deadly interactions between Black civilians and police. But the idea that representation and diversity can help solve racism and police misconduct is still a common theme in pop culture.
Dad's Black and my mom's white.
I'm a bisexual Latina from an immigrant family.
The CBS drama SWAT centers its story on a Black sergeant in LA, and creator Aaron Rasan Thomas wrote along with real-life professionals to develop the series.
But it allowed me to have some insight on, and all of our writers and collaborators, insight on the real lingo, the terminology, and more of a sense, again, on humanizing, the people behind the badge.
Lee sees you as a SWAT leader, mentor.
You got today, and today only, to show me who and what you're made of. You hear me?
Actor Denzel Washington, who has played a law enforcement professional 13 different times on screen, has also spoken on the importance of respecting and humanizing law enforcement after working with them to research roles. From an artist's perspective, it's important to do this research, but when the portrayals lean aspirational, critics like Thrasher say viewers should still be mindful.
From a viewer's perspective, it can make people think that something better is happening when in fact the mere act of representation is covering up and encouraging people not to ask more questions about the perpetuation of violence.
Keith Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
It's been a whole day of big premieres, and coming up, we've got a pretty exciting first look of a new Newsy documentary series. We ain't going nowhere, so we'll see you back here in a second. Documentary storytelling, in-depth reporting, colorful characters. Our new Newsy documentary series, In Real Life, has it all, y'all. It's a different story from a different reporter every week. From international art trafficking to TikTok grandpas to this week's episode that shows how a new generation of American infrastructure is tackling flooding, storm surge, and other climate risks. This thing drops Sunday at 8:30 Eastern, and it covers some serious range from 1,000 feet over Central Park to the outer rim of Louisiana's coastal defense. Here's a little sneak preview of one part of that episode from our series, In Real Life.
For Louisiana, protecting the coastline also means rebuilding the coastline. In some cases, literally building up islands that will protect communities and vital industries. But to get earth and sediment out to the far reaches of the state, Louisiana has to harness the power of the Mississippi River, breaking the river out of the straitjacket of levees it's been kept in for the past century. Getting out to the far reaches of this coastal line of defense involves a journey by sea and by land to a barrier island in the making.
Yeah, we're almost basically in the Gulf of Mexico, huh?
Another 100 feet south of here and we would be in the Gulf. What we're doing is we're restoring the beach, dune, and some of the marsh habitat along here.
So this muddy, sloppy earth out here is the base layer, basically.
This is the base layer. Yeah. And what we have in a lot of our case in Louisiana, we have a sediment deficit problem. There's subsidence that's going on. We have a delta environment. So our delta is subsiding at the same time sea level is rising. So how do you make up that difference of the land going underwater? In this case, you pump some more sand in this area, you build the elevation back up. This island provides that first line of defense against storms that come for our coastal communities.
All right, we just watched an excerpt of the Living with the Water episode of In Real Life. Here to talk to us a bit more about that episode is the host and the executive producer of In Real Life and In the Loop, Zach Toombs. We're talking again for work, man. How's it going?
Doing well, Christian. Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be on this side of the show.
There is existing infrastructure to combat flooding, like levees, but it doesn't seem like, considering how things are going, it doesn't seem like it's doing enough. Can you give us a lay of the land of that infrastructure and how it just isn't doing enough to keep up with climate change?
Definitely. Well, Living with the Water is the first episode of our new Newsy documentary series, In Real Life. And in this first episode, we're looking at infrastructure meant to tackle climate change, flooding, sea level rise in an innovative way. And it's a really urgent issue. You know, to your question, there are clearly problems with especially how American cities handle flooding and storm surge. And we've seen that in New York City. We've seen that along the Gulf Coast very recently. And so now architects and city planners and, you know, climate officials and scientists are looking for different sorts of solutions. Some of them really take a step away from conventional infrastructure and look at ways to build natural solutions into cities. Just, you know, more green space, for example. More green space alone in New York City could soak up a lot of the floodwaters that, you know, when the floods come in now, are just sitting in the city streets.
Curious to know, where else are we seeing, you know, really ambitious projects like this?
Well, Europe. And, you know, for decades, the Netherlands and really across Northern Europe, there have been these projects that manage water, that, you know, don't think in terms of stopping the water altogether. It's not just about building higher levees. That's one thing that we heard from, you know, an architect that we speak to in this episode. It's not just about building higher levees or building higher seawalls. It's about stepping away from this mentality where we have to stop the water and learning to manage the water.
There was a good mix of, you know, kind of seeing some of the construction happening in some of these places and seeing the models of what these projects will look like. And they look like really ambitious projects. And I can't help but to think of, you know, what it's going to cost to actually implement these. What is the price tag of some of these projects? And, you know, who's paying for this construction to be done?
These projects run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The projects that we looked at specifically in this story and other projects that are of this grand scale. It's a lot of money. And, you know, it's a great question. Where does this money come from? In some cases, it comes from taxpayer funding from Housing and Urban Development. Had a huge program around climate resiliency that started under the Obama administration, and that money is going toward the big U in New York City. In Louisiana, it's a bit of a more unique funding structure because the majority of the funding for these coastal restoration projects in Louisiana has actually come from fines that were levied against BP over the Deepwater Horizon incident, which is not something we talk about in the episode, but it's pretty interesting. I mean, basically, as horrible as that Deepwater Horizon accident was, it has led to the money that was brought in through fines, against BP has led to these projects that are restoring coastline and that are helping Louisiana fight this battle to slow and stop its land loss.
Newsy Zach Toombs here telling us about climate change and living with the water, the premiere episode of In Real Life. Zach, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Christian.
You can now watch In the Loop on good old-fashioned TV. Like they say, what's old is new again. But we've always been an extremely online show, so, we're all over those social media platforms. Use the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop to keep in touch with the show and drop us some fan mail. And we'll always try to hit you back. So we're just that close to becoming virtual pen pals. We're going to close things out for tonight's show with a little wraparound we call Closing the Loop. Get it? I'll be replaying all night, folks. Here's a quick look back at our top stories tonight. At the top of the show, we covered one more thing the pandemic has totally reshaped: our city streets, with a huge expansion of outdoor dining and retail areas spilling out onto the roadways. One recent study showed that out of all the urban mobility actions across more than 500 cities and regions across the world, a quarter of those moves reallocated curb space, and a fifth of them fully closed streets. And we took a deep dive into the reckoning for popular police procedurals. In the wake of mass protests against police misconduct and violence, some audiences are questioning whether cop shows can continue as they always have, with a rosy, sometimes aspirational portrayal of the police. And here's a quick look at what's trending today. Bacon prices just recently broke $7 a pound, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, reaching a 40-year high. The last time bacon was this expensive, people were just learning the term VHS, and the mayor of Amity Island was mismanaging a crisis involving a shark. The price jumped about 28% in the last 12 months, so thanks, pandemic. Supply chain issues, rising prices of feed, transportation, and labor, and the reemergence of African swine flu have all played a role. Luckily, prices have likely peaked and should go back to normal by next summer. We'll go ahead and call it Hot Pork Summer. 3 of the most well-known West Coast rappers will be putting on at SoFi Stadium in LA for the next Super Bowl. Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Kendrick Lamar were all announced as halftime show performers. R&B royalty Mary J. Blige and spaghetti connoisseur Eminem will also be making an appearance. Already ruined the performance, and Super Bowl producers should get rid of him. Jay-Z's Rock Nation will produce the show, which will be their 3rd. Halloween may still be weeks away, but the internet has basically made the whole month of October a time to celebrate all things scary. If you ain't with it, spooky season has a name: Spooktober. According to the National Retail Federation, this year in total, Americans are expected to spend $3.3 billion on costumes, $3.2 billion on decorations, and $3 billion on candy. It's a historic high coming after a year of low-key activities during the pandemic, so prepare for some extra spooktacular events. Besides, what's scarier than the last year and a half? Am I right?